ask unanimous consent to address the House for 5 minutes and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
You know, Mr. Speaker, I listen to my colleagues, and I think we're all of one accord when we say that we want to see jobs created in this country, and we want to see the unemployment rate to go down. But the way you do that is the way Ronald Reagan did it when he was president, when he came in when we had 12% unemployment and 14% inflation. He came in and he cut taxes across the board. What are we doing instead? Well, since January, when the president took office, we have spent $73.3 billion that we didn't have on one program. We spent $1.16 trillion, including interest, on the stimulus bill. The omnibus spending bill, $410 billion. If you add interest, that's $625 billion. In June, we spent $106 billion with a lot of pork in it on the defense supplemental. And then on the consolidated appropriation bill, the mini omnibus bill we passed in December, it was $3.5 trillion. And then you include the things that we passed in this House which have not been enacted into law, like cap and trade. That's $846 billion in new taxes. And the proposed government-run health care program, if it were to pass, would cost between $1 and $3 trillion. Now, since the opposition party under Speaker Pelosi took control of this body, the federal deficit has increased from $162 billion the first year she was Speaker in 2007 to $459 billion in 2008, and then it went up by a huge amount, $1.42 trillion in 2009. This is just an unsustainable growth rate. And over the last 3 years, we've increased the debt ceiling 5 times since she took office as Speaker. This is something that's unbelievable. It went from $8.97 trillion in January of 2007 to $12.39 trillion today, which is an increase of $3.4 trillion, or 38% in just 3 years. Now you're talking about spending $3 trillion a year, more than half of that borrowed money, and we're talking about how we're going to get control of it. Tomorrow night, the President is going to be speaking from right there, just below the Speaker's lectern. And the President's going to try to address our economic problems. And as I understand it from some of the reports that have come out, he's going to talk about freezing spending, or a partial freeze, over the next 3 years that would reduce the budget by less than 1%, or $15 billion in the first year. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm for freezing spending. But when you look at what's happened in the last year or two, especially during the last year, it's unbelievable. We had an 8% boost in spending in the omnibus bill the President signed into law in March, and a 12% boost that he signed in right at the end of last year in December. We're spending money like it's going out of style. Now, what's the answer? The answer is that we get together and realize the way to create jobs is to stimulate the private sector, and that is by cutting taxes, cutting personal income taxes, cutting corporate taxes, cutting capital gains taxes. That will give business, industry, and individuals more disposable income for investment and to buy products. If the government just continues to spend like we're doing right now, we're digging ourselves into a deeper and deeper hole, and it's not going to solve the unemployment problem. I heard some of my colleagues down there talking about how things are getting better. We just had 10.5% unemployment. Now it's at least 10% unemployment, and when you add in those who are working part-time who want a full-time job, it's probably more like 17% of the people, 18% of the people that are either out of work or have given up. I mean, it's just terrible. So what do? We ought to do what's been done by John F. Kennedy in the past, what Ronald Reagan did when he was president, and that is say, let's cut taxes. Let's give a shot in the arm to the private sector. They create jobs. Government cannot and will not create jobs by spending. And tomorrow night when the President speaks, he'll get a lot of applause from probably both sides of the aisle when he says some of the things he's going to say. But the thing that concerns me the most is the spending freeze he's talking about is not really anything but a drop in the bucket. It's not even a drop in the bucket when you talk about a 1% spending freeze over the next 3 years. When you're talking about a multi-trillion-dollar deficit that goes on and on and on, and you're talking about a spending freeze that's going to save maybe, $4 or $5 billion. It's just nothing. So I would admonish the President, or suggest to the President, that he start moving toward cutting taxes, stimulate the private sector, and cut the huge deficit spending we're facing. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida arise?